Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Lincoln Rhyme. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, obviously, this is a really important case, this being, the bone collector's back in New York, and obviously he strikes, so... Obviously, and it's interesting timing because obviously Amelia was already studying over some previous profiles of who the bone collector is. At the same time, she's worried about the whole Rachel situation because she still hasn't told Rachel, a serial killer knows exactly where we live and everything. But Lincoln does set stuff up, so it's there's a well-trained person that's going to be there to make sure no one gets inside your house. Wanted to make sure that Amelia will have some peace of mind during this investigation. She's like, thank you, Lincoln. So makes her way over to the crime scene. This crime scene's a little bit different because it turns out the first victim is actually someone that Lincoln knows. The fact is, one of the clues there is his book. Basically, we end up finding out that the dude was paralyzed by pufferfish poison, and basically made to drink until he basically drowned in it. And it's that's a horrible way to die. But the fact of the matter is, Amelia was kind of wait, there's actually more to this case, because the fact of the matter is, when you look at this particular person, it's your book, it's someone that you know, and the person is paralyzed too. It's supposed to be a reflection of Lincoln himself, which obviously Lincoln's okay, I get it. Amelia constantly throughout the episode wants to say hey, maybe we should look at this a little bit differently, because she brings up the fact is, because this circumstance is different. In all the time that Lincoln's been hunting the bone collector, he's never made it personal. This is the first time he's ever made it personal, going after someone that Lincoln knew. And it's but why focus on this guy? Why now? Out of all this time, you could have come after Lincoln, that Lincoln's been after you. But why now? I guess for one, this is his first killings. Well, I was about to say because he still kept killing in that 3-year period, right? After Lincoln was kind of out of, that's what I'm because it seems like he takes breaks, he does 3 killings and then disappears for a year and then comes back. But I think my understanding is, granted, maybe they kind of explained this and I'm not, maybe I just kind of missed it, but it seemed like he kind of stopped at 3 years because I guess he felt like he beat Lincoln. So it's I got my 3 and I beat Lincoln at the same time on the final one. So I was I get to walk away, but because even Daniela brought up the fact is he's kind of been off since he stopped doing work and everything, that whole situation. So that's one aspect of it. But like I said, Amelia was just kind of something's not right. But Lincoln's no, let's follow the evidence that's there. We're not going to get caught up in some profiling BS. So it's all right, Lincoln's very stubborn in his way of this is how we're going to get the bone collector. Okay, so Amelia kind of has to go. Obviously they track down the second victim. Sadly, they're not able to get there in time. And obviously, Amelia has to go in there to be Lincoln's eyes and ears. Obviously, the room is filled with carbon dioxide, so she has to put on a hazmat suit and stuff like that to kind of get through, And obviously, she has to get the evidence, which obviously Kate's kind of against Lincoln pushing her to get the evidence, because it's no, we need to get leave this for some medical professional, because the fact of the matter is it could jeopardize the body or something like that, or because she isn't well trained enough, maybe it could be a situation where the evidence ends up getting destroyed as a byproduct. But Lincoln's if we don't, because of the conditions of the room, the evidence is going to degrade and be useless, so we have to kind of jump on it now, even suggesting that Amelia slice open the dude's throat if she needs to, because she tries to pull on it delicately but fastly, but it gets lodged, and it's you're gonna have to cut open his throat. He's I would have gotten this evidence 5 minutes ago. Kate's no, it's more so an unethical thing of don't do that, don't mutilate the body. It's kind of an effed up thing. There's better solutions to this situation, but obviously Lincoln's it's time, the time you gotta hurry. Oh, never mind. They don't need to worry about it because she ended up getting the evidence. But for Lincoln, it's no matter what the case may be, we need to get the evidence no matter what ends up happening. So no matter what the cost is. So there's that whole situation. Sadly, the whole Lincoln and Amelia disagreement about this. I mean, they've had their disagreements before, but this is probably like the biggest blowout of a disagreement because Amelia keeps trying to say like there's something more to this situation, but Lincoln's not really willing to listen. Like he's listening because it's like, oh yeah, this is stuff from my book and everything, sure, but he's like, it's this and that, but it's like he's not really listening to her because he's so certain, like, because he's like, all we have to do, he's like, we have, like, it comes from a good place of like, we gotta hurry up and find these victims before, you know, he ends up killing them. It's like, you know, so it's that side of things. But we also learned an interesting but also very disheartening and sad aspect of Lincoln's condition is basically he, I'm not even going to attempt to repeat it because I don't remember what it is, but essentially his condition makes it so that his body can't register like when something's wrong. Like normally your brain will, you know, send signals to your body, be like, oh yeah, like if you stub your toe, oh, like that pain is in your toe. But because he's paralyzed, the signals, it doesn't, his body doesn't know where to like send a signal because it's like we don't know where to send it, and it kind of like basically kind of overloads his system a little bit. And I'm like, because all of a sudden he starts like almost like spasming and almost seemed like he was having a seizure or something. It's like, what the hell was that? And it's like now knowing that basically it happens from time to time. What was interesting was the fact is that Claire brings up the fact is that it is like a little bit of a mystery of like, they really don't 100% know the ins and outs of his conditions, are kind of like, you know, it's kind of a little bit of a mystery, which I was like, at first my immediate thought was like, could it be that the bone collector set this whole situation up to own particular like trigger that? Like, would he know enough about Lincoln's and, you know, condition? Like, because I think like people in his condition, you know, being paralyzed like that, it can happen to him. So I'm like, I guess if the bone collector was well versed enough, I was like, maybe he knew the kind of what triggers to pull to kind of do that. I don't know. Like I said, I could be giving the bone collector too much credit, but that's what initially was what I was thinking. But it seems like no, it's just kind of a sad byproduct of just like him and, you know, Amelia arguing, which also speaks volumes because the fact is Amelia is one of the few people, well, you know, we obviously know Claire can disagree with him as well, but they're one of the few handful of people that will argue with Lincoln and kind of stand fast a little bit in their how they feel. Everyone else kind of has to, they just kind of suck it up and just deal with it because Lincoln is typically right, not always, but more often than not he's right. Because it's interesting too with this whole situation is the fact is, well, I didn't talk about it, but like the bone collector taking a call from Danielle while he's like working on a second victim, it's like that shows you just like, because you know, because obviously the profile states like he doesn't do this he doesn't get any like physical or sexual like release from doing this. It is just purely like a game, because in the grand scheme of things, we know who he was, that he was actually somewhat a part of the program. Like obviously he was trying out to be a cop or something, but he was like, oh, talking about Lincoln, but Lincoln kind of talked shit to him. So it's like maybe he failed out of the program, and maybe that's what it is. Like if it's like, oh, if I can't join you, I'll beat you. About to make me a nerdy reference. It's kind of like the Flash and Reverse Flash of like the Reverse Flash was like, oh, I can't be the hero, so I'll be the villain. I'll be the one that destroys the Flash type of situation. I'm wondering, is it kind of something similar to that, where it's like maybe he failed out of the program, maybe he flunked in some shape or form. Maybe Lincoln just kept upstaging him, or maybe Lincoln, that one instance, Lincoln embarrassed him. Maybe Lincoln did other instances of embarrassing him, where he was just like, oh, you think you're so great, and obviously, you know, I mean, maybe it wasn't even just Lincoln. Maybe Lincoln was the beginning, kind of like the catalyst to it, but maybe other people kind of like underestimated him and made him feel small and pathetic. And obviously, you know, he's lashing out by becoming a killer. Like I said, it's like, you know what? If I can't be a cop and be a great cop, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna be a great killer. You know, maybe, you know, something like that, egotistical like that. But it was interesting, like him being so calm and everything. It seemed like he was almost making a mistake because he, like, one of the gas canisters kind of went off early, but he kind of tightened it back up. It's just kind of like, it's like, yeah, it's like he's very meticulous, but it does seem like even he's not completely immune to like kind of slipping up. But he catches himself, like, it seems like 99% of the time. It's a whole thing, but. He also brought up something interesting I thought was the fact is that he said that like Danielle was like his life advisor. So I was wondering, like, is that actually how they met? Like, had he become a killer yet by the time that she became his life advisor? Maybe he was in that transitional period of going from working in law enforcement to being on the opposite side of law enforcement, being a serial killer. Maybe meeting Danielle kind of gave him that perfect balance, because, you know, Dexter, you know, lived his old secret life and, you know, had a quote unquote normal life because he needed to kind of fit in. Maybe that's what's happening with the bone collector, or maybe Daniel actually does kind of like make his heart go pitter patter, or doki doki if you prefer. Maybe it's kind of a situation of that. So it's like maybe she, in a twisted way, kind of not twisted in her sense, but twisted in his sense of like she inspires him. It's like, oh, I get all this love and it allows me to do my work and feel accomplished. It's the whole thing of like makes you wonder, does he actually even love Danielle, or is she just kind of like a serial killer equivalency to a beard? I'm curious if something kind of similar to that. Maybe not. We'll kind of have to see. Because she could just be. I guess a more apt description would be more so like a mask. She's meant to be like, how Dexter kind of tried to be normal and stuff like that. Maybe, like I said, maybe Danielle is supposed to be the bone collector's mask. But like I said, the life advisor thing, because it also depends on how long him and Danielle have been together. We haven't really gotten the full scope of their relationship, so it's like maybe it's the entire time he's been killing, maybe it's part of it, maybe they're, because of stuff that comes up later on. It's like, well, because of like earlier killings of his and stuff like that, like, maybe before he got everything down, before he got his pattern, before he got meticulous and stuff like that, maybe he made mistakes. Maybe those mistakes were made before he met Danielle. Hey, it'd actually kind of be interesting if we end up finding out that actually Danielle was actually supposed to be one of his victims, but then it was like, oh, he met her and actually fell in love with her, maybe, or found her interesting enough that like, oh, I'm not going to kill you, so maybe not. Like I said, that's just kind of me throwing that out there, but we'll have to see. But obviously, continuing, circling to something else I meant to bring up too was obviously after the second victim, the mayor decided he didn't want to kind of announce it, that the bone collector was back in town. It makes sense in the grand scheme of things. The last thing you want is the city to know that there's a infamous serial killer that's on the loose, a serial killer that's evaded the law for many, many years. Not the most, and it's probably like the perception would look bad upon you for letting something like that happen. It's like, because the police failure is going to look badly on you, so that's probably, the optics of it. It's probably another angle to it. But, obviously, the bone collector didn't appreciate, it being looked like it was an accident or something like that. So he's like, oh no, he got hit. It was his pride that was attacked. He was like, bump that. How dare you not acknowledge me and my work? Because even Danielle was like, oh, you're a perfectionist and you just want, So it's like he wants his work recognized by people is kind of what she was getting at, and she just has no idea. I mean, the sad situation is like all that she's saying, that we as the audience know the real implications of what she's saying, like how it applies to his work. She thinks she knows what it is, but obviously she doesn't, so... But obviously the bone collector sends in photos of proof saying that these two killings, yeah, they were me. They weren't accidents. And now the whole city knows, and now it kind of put them on. But like I said, it's a complicated thing of like, you want to let the city know that there's a serial killer out there, but obviously by letting them know, it's like, oh, now it's like you put, now that they know, the city's in a panic. So it's kind of like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation. It just also meant that the bone collector was going to do things as well. Like, I guess it could have always worked out differently. Like maybe he could have sent in something else to kind of potentially set that in motion. But I guess it's the better of any other option of how he could have like handled that, to be like, oh yeah, these killings are 100% on me. But obviously, kind of circling back, using the clues from the second victim, they are able to figure out where the third victim potentially is. But Amelia's like, yeah, but doesn't this seem a little too easy? And he's like, easy? I figured this out. She's like, yeah, but it doesn't, she's like, just something doesn't seem right. But Lincoln is so steadfast in his own belief that he's like, you know what? No, we don't have time. Like, he's arguing, but then Stiletto kind of steps up and it's like, listen to her, because what happened 3 years ago, I told you to back down, but I told you to wait for backup, but you didn't. And he was like, but Lincoln's like, yeah, but if I didn't, I was right. And Stiletto was like, yeah, but I was right too, that it was a trap. But he's like, I got to the victim. It's like, yeah, but still, like, the fact of the matter is, all we need to do is take a second to take a step back and think about the situation, so it is a thing of like, and I think that's the beautiful element of this episode, because yes, Lincoln is so smart, but because he is so smart, he, and it's even something Amelia brought up earlier in the episode. The fact of the matter is, like, you're always been on the defensive. We're playing his game. Have you ever thought about going on the offense? And, you know, Lincoln kind of made it seem like, oh, we've tried so many different things, but it's just kind of like the only way we can make sure we can get to the victims in time is to play his game. He's like, that's the only time we've ever gotten close. Granted, you've gotten close, but have you been successful? Your last run came close, but you were super unsuccessful. The victim ended up getting killed and you ended up in the condition you were in. So it's not really, I mean, it's close, but in these circumstances, that type of close isn't good enough. And obviously that's an issue for, like, because that's what it is. And even, like I said, because even Felix had said like a couple episodes ago that it's personal for Lincoln, because it just like the Bone Collector is prideful, so is Lincoln. I mean, they're kind of, I think the whole purpose of it is that they are kind of mirror images of each other. They're just, like I said, they're the most extreme sides of this spectrum of just, obviously the Bone Collector being the extreme side, obviously being a serial killer, Lincoln being the extreme side, being on the good guy side of things, you know. So, but I think just Lincoln's able to kind of think outside the box, but for him, he's so steadfast in like the evidence is the key. Nothing else matters, because it's kind of like, because that's come up before of like, oh, here's a profile, but it's like the profile doesn't matter as long as the evidence will never lie to us. The evidence won't be wrong. You know, he's so steadfast in believing in the evidence and not, well, obviously Amelia, you know, it's like I have a brain of my own, much like you do, so I'm gonna go at this like from a different perspective. So she was the one that was able to actually figure out, like, Lincoln think the evidence could apply to something else from your book, and Lincoln figures out, okay, so basically there are two places that fit where the third victim could be, and so the team ends up splitting up. Where Salido ends up being a decoy, where Amelia ends up being the right place, but it's like nothing's there, and she's not figured. She's like, because obviously it's like connected to a case of Lincoln's, but then Amelia kind of figures it out. She's like, wait, I remember from your book, you talked about a guy that had a suicide, because it's like, because in Lincoln's mind the entire time he's thinking like, oh, the Bone Collector wants to kind of make these killings and stop them on top of my accomplishment. Because the thing is, the first victim was someone he knew. The second victim wasn't someone that he knew, and it turns out neither is the third victim, but we'll kind of get to that soon enough. But the reason, what makes all these cases connected is in fact Lincoln. He just wasn't looking through the right lens. He was thinking, and I think you can make argument about this, he was so focused on looking at like, oh, this is him squashing my successes, that he wasn't willing to look at what they really represented, his failures. And Amelia's the one that kind of figured out, he's like, wait, right, because the first was his teacher who failed him, who kind of which inadvertently pushed him to kind of be down the path he was. The second victim ended up being a situation because he didn't check like the ladies' restroom or something like that, so things kind of went wrong because of that. And the third, it's like he didn't recognize the sign that this guy was about to commit suicide. So it was, you know, and once again, because Lincoln is so, you know, narcissistic and egotistical, he was like, oh, he just assumed that these were about his accomplishments, because he himself, he kind of focuses on his failures, but at the same, like, he like points out, like, it's the thing of like, he is aware of some of his failures, but he wasn't even willing to let himself even think or piece that together until Amelia pointed it out. So luckily, they were able to get there in time, because the final victim, it's like, oh, we didn't get to our time. But it's like, no, they did. But obviously, Lincoln was like, but we don't know if the Bone Collector's still around. Amelia's like, you know, if you were here, you would do this whole situation of kind of like moving her and kind of putting her in a position where she isn't, you know, being hung or, you know, being killed. But it's like, Lincoln's like, yeah, and me doing what I would do is what put me in my situation right now. But Amelia kind of goes for it, because, you know, that's just who it is. So luckily, I was on bated breath, because I was like, oh, please don't tell me, oh, please don't let there be some like trigger where it's like something happens afterwards. But it's like, oh no, luckily it all worked out. But obviously Lincoln kind of takes this, you know, hard, because for him it's like, he feels like he failed, because he's like, you know, I was wrong. If it wasn't for you, but, you know, and, you know, Amelia's like, well, no, it worked out, because I had the idea, and Salido was telling you to listen to me, which you did, and you figured it out when everything was presented. And it was something, the profiler that, you know, that Amelia was referencing, Coulter, because we saw flashbacks of her and Lincoln, because once again Lincoln is so adamant, like he's like, oh, he's throwing out theories and stuff like that when he's working with Coulter, but he's like, yeah, that's just theorizing, but here's the evidence to say this and this, which obviously it helps out and everything. But then later on, you know, Coulter chewed him out, because it's like, yeah, you're smart, you think you're smarter than everyone else, which, yeah, you're pretty smart, you're great, you are great, but you'll never reach your full potential because you're working alone, and your narcissism, your ego is going to get in the way of that, and it does, because he's always handled things alone, because he's always thought himself a step ahead of everyone, that he didn't need anyone. And now it shows it's like, we're here, we're a team. Like, the fact of the matter is, we'll get through this, we'll figure this out, because we make up, because like I said, even as smart as Lincoln is, he has his blind spots, and the rest of the team can fill in those blind spots. It's not, which obviously me saying the word's blind spot, I mean, I know it's just a natural word anyway, but just obviously because it's NBC, I just, it makes me think like, oh yeah, the actual TV show blind spot. But regardless, it's a thing of like, you don't have to go at this alone. And the fact of the matter is, because the thing is, the Bone Collector is all alone, and you are so busy playing his game, going at this alone. Now you have an entire team behind you. You don't have to. We've got each other's back. Where others kind of might falter, we'll make up for it, kind of fill in those blanks, So, and obviously I brought up earlier, they're trying to go at this situation a little bit differently, trying to find some of the Bone Collector's earlier kills, because obviously he wasn't perfect from the beginning. He obviously made mistakes. So they're trying to catch him off guard, because Lincoln goes on TV and he was like, oh yeah, like I'm done. It's like, oh, you're retiring from the case? It's like, oh no, I'm retired from playing his game. So now we're going to play our own. It's like, we are going to find you and track you down. It's kind of showing him like, oh, because the fact is, we're not playing your game anymore because you cheat, because the fact of the matter is, and like I said, I still think it's just interesting that he picked, now out of any time, like, why pick those? Well, I guess those failures came out. Well, it depends on how long ago Lincoln wrote that book. I'm assuming it's before his accident and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is, once again, it's like, why now out of any time? It's because Lincoln's gotten so close, and he's like, oh, you're not, it is a thing of like, oh, you aren't worthy to me because look at all these failures. But that was the whole point. That's what made him think, because obviously, he's focusing so much on Lincoln's failures to kind of compensate for the fact is he's had failures of his own. There was even a moment that obviously he was in the bar, he was about to walk away. I'm like, oh, isn't that an issue for, because I was like, oh, maybe he's not thinking, and he immediately turns around and grabs the glass. I was like, oh, so you did think about that, because I was wondering, because it's like, you don't want to leave any chances that there might be something left behind that will have your prints on it. So I mean, it's kind of interesting that literally he lives because it's always the smallest thing to end up taking people down. Because what was it that took down Al Capone? Wasn't all the murders and stuff like that he orchestrated, and being the mob boss. It was pure tax evasion. That's what they got him on. That was just kind of like what was necessary. So obviously in this particular case, his fingerprints on just some random glass could turn out to be like the linchpin to kind of end up being his undoing. But as he walks out, he smashes it in the ground because they upset him. It's like, so now the thing is, the Bone Collector, because it was even something Lincoln had said, it's like, yeah, they saved the third victim, so this is unprecedented before. So it's a situation of how is the Bone Collector going to act, because normally he will kill the third victim and disappear for a year, but now he might kind of ramp up stuff. He's going to change his style and everything, maybe, but obviously the whole point is to kind of make him angry and sloppy, so he'll kind of drop his guard. And obviously they're getting to him since he smashed that glass. But obviously this is, like I said, a public announcement to the city and everything, and obviously Rachel's listening to it. She's like, so how long have you known? And Amelia tells her, I've known for a couple weeks, but I just didn't want you to know, because obviously he knows where we live and is worried. But, her sister's kind of like, maybe it's kind of a good thing that you lied to me, because obviously, after her experience with a serial killer, now knowing another one, a very dangerous one that's been on the loose for years, knows where they live, like, that's got to be kind of a harsh situation. So I'm curious to see kind of what that looks like going forward, especially because she was, striving so hard to kind of go back to having like a normal life and everything. She was making such a point of that. So I'm curious to see, where things kind of go in that lane for Rachel. But she even made that point. It's like, oh, Lincoln said that you're not going to play his game, that you're going to play this new game, but is it going to work out? And Amelia kind of doesn't really give her an answer, because she's hopeful, but she doesn't know. Like, all they can do is try and work this the best they can. So there's that whole situation. So but at the same time, there's the whole thing with Lincoln. Obviously, like, his son didn't tell him about the fact is that, like, oh yeah, he's what was it, like, he was going to like a basketball camp or something like that, and it's like, wait, what? Why? It's like, because he doesn't want to bring up the whole, like, oh yeah, like, getting like noticed for basketball and stuff like that, because he feels bad, because it's like, oh, I can't actually play basketball with my own old man. So But, Lincoln's kind of like, at the end of the day, he's like, no matter what, it's like, it's okay that you didn't tell me. And, he's like, so why did you call me? He's like, I just wanted to hear you. And, are you good? And he's like, yeah, I'm good. And you? And Lincoln's like, I'm good now too. And I think because, it's like we didn't have a win, but we had a small victory today, Lincoln isn't really good at, I think, taking those small victories. But now, Amelia kind of changed that for him to accept that it is one. We got an upper hand on the bone collector this time around. So kind of we should be able to enjoy that. But the fact is that I think that probably did make him feel better, but also hearing from his son probably made him feel better too. So I think it was probably a combination of two with the whole Lincoln situation, that kind of put him in a better mood. But once again, I think it is the thing. I'm curious to see if this ends up shaking him in any shape or form. Maybe not, but I wonder, is it going to cause him to kind of second guess himself going forward? If it was something, and they even brought it up at the preview of like how Amelia had brought up previously. I think it was literally last episode about like making things a little more harmonious. So I think Lincoln is potentially going to ease up maybe a little bit. He'll still kind of be a little narcissistic, but I think he'll shift things up enough to kind of, make up for the fact is, once again, it's not just him anymore. This whole team is there, to kind of have each other's back with this whole situation. So, but yeah, either way, I'm very interested to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.